Kelty Talks.
Kelty Talks.
Welcome to Kelty Talks.
So what are we going to talk about this evening? We're sitting around this beautiful campfire.
Talk about the wetbacks.
The wetbacks.
You're talking about like the beaners that migrate via ocean, and sea currents that come from.
No, stop being PC. He's talking about build
not,
that
like,
wall, the wetbacks.
No, well, the actual wetbacks are ones that migrate like with the rafts and like little boats and stuff.
Well, that's in Africa or the Mediterranean. Here,
no, that's like
it's the ones that cross over the Rio Grande. Like they literally swim across. Versus
right. That's what I figured.
The legal means they decide to break the law.
Instead of taking a boat, which they're not getting their wets back.
Because I remember wetbacks was like a 90s time when it started.
The ones that get their backs all wet to get here.
Well, either way.
Swim the ocean, swim the river, it's all wetback.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. At this point, they're swimming, their backs are wet, they're wetbacks.
I mean, what's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying the truth.
What are we going to do to prevent wetbacks from getting in? See, I believe when they're in the water, they're obtaining to a different law, right?
Well, we could take the communist China approach and build a giant border with mines, barbed wire, sniper towers, machine gun turrets, and the whole 9 yards to prevent any type of
movement in or out.
In or out, just completely in or out.
Why not?
Barrier. I mean, that's one alternative
build that wall.
That could be done.
When you build a wall, it fucking keeps people in too. Like George Orwell.
I think what most people are doing now is just not giving a shit. They complain about it, but nothing gets done.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to build a wall because we said that we're going to have construction, but are we actually building it right now?
I assume we're in the middle of an entire civilization change, but like Kelty said before, it's like a frog in water. Good luck seeing their moves when they're purposefully trying to dance in the shadows and hide them from you. Like, that's plain and simply what's up, is like we've got representatives that are purposefully manipulating the system so they can, I mean, we can sit here all day long, I guess, and argue about why they're doing it. Oh, they're doing it because they want to bring in more people for economic means to stay the powerhouse, or they're doing it for La Raza so they can make the new Atland, or whatever, however the fuck you say that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like the same reason why you got the Northwestern Redoubt for, conservative people, or the Ozark movement or whatever. It's who cares why they're doing it? Really, it boils down to it's happening, and if you want to keep your blinders on, you can do that, and your kids will suffer unless you don't believe in kids. Then you already lost, or you're going to be taken over and you're going to turn into that kind of people, regardless if it's happening in Germany or if it's happening in Sweden, which is a hellhole now, one of the best countries on earth, and turn into a damn hellhole.
So do you think that there should be a set limitation on a cap of what we can take in? Because that's kind of what it used to be like prior to, I believe, the 80s, is that they had a cap on, okay, we will take in this many refugees and this many, people from this area and this area. That way our own American population that was already native to being born in America let's say 1920, just to be fair. 1920 to current, what I mean. So anybody born between that time period that's been here. But in order to not wash out the nationality of what's there, and I believe each country had something quite similar up until some of the UN treaties, I believe, and then it started going from instead of it being an estimated limit, it became a maximum standard, where now we're just we have to bring in this many in order to diversify certain areas.
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying. We could argue about why they're doing it, but the fact is they are actually
They are, definitely.
And they're doing it. Like I just saw, I think it was W77. He just posted something that said, in the last 5 weeks, 7,000 migrants have been brought into the country by DHS alone. Like, this isn't counting like the
Just
ones
by the
that-
Department of Human Services.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, they're actually just fucking filtering them in. And I'll tell you, at one point, not too long ago, I underwrote insurance, and I would go out into the mountains here in California and do my work. And it was really interesting because 7 o'clock in the morning, you got these, and I know these mountains real well, and I know the demographics of the mountains real well. And 7 o'clock in the morning, I'd show up for an appointment, and on my way there, there'd be like groups of Latinos, about mid-20s, a male and a female, or males
Yeah.
alone,
Okay.
and they'd have backpacks. They were all like 4 feet tall and dark kind of, not like the imperial Mexican that are still like, I'm Spanish Mexican.
Right, like the European Spanish that live in Mexico claiming
Yeah.
to be Mexican.
Yeah,
but
well, I mean,
you're not
there's
talking
fucking-
about those ones. You're talking about the
Right.
actual native, like.
the natives being shoved out of the
Right,
country.
and they're distinctly
that's
different in
really
some of their
what's happening
features. You're
here.
right. They are a little bit darker. They are a little bit. Well, they're a lot bit shorter. They're
Nayarit,
right. I
or
mean,
they're what the Mexicans themselves have a derogatory term for them. And if I remember right, I have a Mexican buddy. He's a really good friend of mine, and we were talking about it. He was like throwing around slang terms because he's the other kind. He's like light-skinned. He's tall and thin and really
maybe even
like,
the wispy
good-looking.
mustache too, or like the.
I don't recall even
Because
having
that's
one.
like, well,
He
even
may
if,
not even grown mustache, but
yeah,
but-
because most Spanish
but the point
Europeans
is
grow
like
patchy ones.
he was very much about that status. Like he definitely, like, I don't know, I'm a fucking white dude from America and I love that shit.
You didn't
for
realize that there
him-
was a distinction in their own culture.
No, I had no idea. Just like in the East Indian culture, there's like a big distinction between the lighter skinned southern East Indians and the darker skinned northern and more impoverished East Indians. Or maybe it's vice versa. I don't fucking know. It doesn't matter to me. But
Right, but
It-
either
that's-
way,
that's
there's
the
a
thing.
distinction that
You know what I mean?
they themselves make amongst each other, but it's something that should be recognized as well. It's naive in America to think like, oh, it's just Mexicans, or oh, it's just Latinos, or
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just, Middle Easterns.
that's true. The term was called a Oaxaquito is what he called them.
What's that?
I no fucking idea, but what he said, what it was like the equivalent of calling someone like a really derogatory term in American, like calling a Mexican
Okay,
beaner
like
or
a slanger,
something. Yeah, it was very much slang, but
slang
it was
term.
like slang that he used.
like a negative slang term.
Very much.
Okay,
yes.
got it.
He
But they
hammered
would
them.
use it amongst themselves.
Yes.
Very
So
interesting.
they do
Well, you
that.
know what? This is something that I want to bring back into is like it's not just a Mexican thing. It's not just this. They talk about the wall, but the wall seems to be this symbolism more or less to me than anything, because when we're talking about immigration, it's not just coming from over the Mexican border. We're talking about immigration due to, like I said, state diversity and like refugees, but we're also seeing churches in our own states, like the
Ooh,
St.
California
Lutherans
Bethel. They're
or the
nasty
California
motherfuckers.
Bethels.
Them
Fuck
culty
those.
dudes,
Or,
like
yeah,
they're
like,
so culty.
They're going over and then
Crazy.
they're bringing
Not just culty.
in loads and loads of
what you got? Uche?
It's
undocumented.
not
people.
just they're culty. They've
So
actually
true,
been
Kelty.
they've been caught actually with human trafficking. Like it's not just a cult. These people are actually within the cartel, or at least have their own branch of human trafficking.
Right.
Specifically, they're doing children, but they've been caught multiple times, and they've
Young
been caught
adults.
paying,
What do you mean?
and they've been
Young
caught paying
adults.
off
Transageism.
the county, quote unquote, and different politicians in order
Ooh,
to
like
get away
they
with
do in some of the counties in California. They'll move in to the area, have this fucking huge church, and I know of a few areas in California where they've literally given millions of
Oh
dollars.
yeah, hundreds of millions.
Not only to seat themselves in city council and get like really lavish deals on land and like these building projects that they're doing, but they also have radio stations in those same cities, and these same motherfuckers are connected to city council now. And check this out. In one city in Northern California, they freaking gave the airport like a crazy amount of money
Just so they can fly their
so they could fly
undocumented people
yes
into
Isn't
America.
that crazy? And
That
you know
is-
what? Like
Yeah.
this is the type
And
of
that
shit
comes
That's
into
the shit
down.
that makes us my
nobody
skin
wants to
crawl.
talk about.
See, and this is
It makes my skin
beyond
crawl.
immigration.
Like,
this is
beyond
like
John Jones
human
type of shit.
trafficking
This is
type
beyond
stuff.
Jim
Look
Jones
at you guys,
John
so
Jones.
excited.
Yeah, no, it's
I hope the audience gets us excited about this issue because it's pretty fucking important. Like, it's literally fundamentally changing.
Well,
When you go and sit
it's kind of
at-
fucked up that they use a disguise of just this really nice and friendly type of persona, like the people that actually like are under their spell, so to speak. They're really nice, and so it puts off this like, they can't be. These guys are too nice. They can't be doing these types of nefarious activities. But
Yeah,
it's,
when I'm sitting at freaking In-N-Out.
oh, don't get me wrong.
They
It's
come
creepy.
up and they're
it's
just-
creepy, especially when they come up
Totally.
and they want to pray over you and stuff. It's like, dude, I just want to enjoy my meal. Like,
They
I'm
fucking
not.
grab you by the. I was in Winco one time, and they freaking come. Some Asian dude from freaking Australia.
Wasn't he? Yeah, an Asian from Australia.
He came walking
Yeah.
up, and I had my daughter, and
Strangest
she was
thing.
young at the time, and we were sitting like in the middle of the aisle. There was like the first or some shit, so there was a lot of people around, and we were standing there like next to the chili or something, about to pick some stuff, and some dude comes out of nowhere, and like he's dressed in all white, and he like grabs me by the arm, and I like spun around and like looked at him, and he was like, "Oh my God, the Messiah, can I touch you?" And I'm like thinking, what the fuck is
dude?
this?
Like, don't.
Dude.
Dude,
Is this
like,
candid
honestly,
camera or some shit?
Like,
I
that's what
was
it
so
seems like.
uncomfortable. Like I started
That's like
walking
something
down
Ashton
the
Kutcher would plan
aisle,
or
like
something, like-
mixing in with other
this
people in the
isn't
crowd.
real.
Like that's not my family.
Yeah, and like I said, I had
I
my
watched
daughter
from
with me, and she
afar.
was seated in the basket, and I was
Right.
pushing, so she was facing me, like right next to me, and he had me by the arm, and he's like, "Can I pray with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, man." And so I let him pray with me, and he started like saying some crazy offbeat shit about how I was the Messiah, and like there I was in the store, and he was from Australia, and he was this Asian dude. I mean, maybe he was born in Australia.
I mean, don't.
Can you imagine doing
And
that?
then my daughter like saw him holding me, and like she was just young at the time, so she like
Put
this
her
must be the
hand
thing. So she
on
put her
him,
hand.
too.
So I'm standing in the freaking aisle,
Tons of people around
broad daylight,
watching and
and
stuff.
there's like
Did you embrace it and actually like, yes, you need to lend me, or you need
no,
to give me
No,
your money.
no,
Actually,
we
I need
stood
to
there
didn't
rolling my
encourage it.
eyes until he finished.
My plan is
Yeah.
to build a giant monument of
I mean, we-
myself, and I need your money to
Oh
do
my
it.
God,
Like,
I
you
should've-
make some.
We
should've
passively
drank off that. I
allowed
should've
him to
pulled
go
their
through his
skin
That's
motions.
what like.
But you
Be-
know-
that's what Bethel's doing. That's
But
what
that
other
was some
people
of
are
our
doing.
first
Yeah.
That's just part of
experience
life.
to what that was bringing
just the
into our
game.
town.
Yeah.
That was definitely our first experience with it. But don't get us wrong, like we ourselves do have a belief in a higher order, a God,
And we're not
something
totally, we're
that's
totally
Of
not
course.
racist. Like
But
I
that is
think
just totally inappropriate.
people are
Like,
cool, you know.
well, and
People
the
are
thing
all right.
about
It's
Bethel
just
is
I want
like
my
that's
culture like
off-putting.
if you go to Nicaragua, all of the people there are miraculously Nicaraguan.
Yeah.
And if you go to anywhere else in the world, you want to Somalia, and they all happen to be Somalian. But if you go to our country, we've been dubbed since the middle of the century,
melting pot,
middle of
yeah.
last century, as this melting pot, right? Like, what the fuck? Who said anything about that?
Viva la France! Here's your liberty
Well, see,
statue.
when you do a melting
Take
pot,
it
like
down, man.
Yeah.
what you're doing is you're creating this
No.
element of like it's a gray. It's
No
there,
one gets
there is no
along.
character to it.
Right.
Like all the other countries are seen as actually having like their own cultures, and nobody goes to America to experience the American culture. There's things that people
Well,
want here. There's,
Sadly
like-
enough, our American culture has been labeled as nothing more than a carnival full of fat degenerates. Like,
like, yeah.
You know
a
what I
bunch of
mean?
fat
Like,
cowboys at the rodeo.
it's really sad what they've played us out to be in the last,
Didn't know the rodeo's
decade.
fucking cool.
We, like I
Yeah,
said
rodeos are
in,
bad.
our
Rodeos are fun,
last,
but like.
like I
so-
said in our last video, we used to be on an era where socially, culturally, we were, grass-fed, meat-fed, raised to be strong. We had that mentality that it was like our nation first. Yes, our nation was, like a nation of many different diversities, but we're like diverse but strong, and like this is like we're not even going to pay attention to saying, oh, you are classified as this, you're classified as this, you're classified as that. It was like, no, we're American. We're proud to be American. We're here in America.
Well, it goes
So
back to-
here's our
it goes
American
back to pride.
flag. Like,
It goes all the way back to pride, then. Like to actually have pride in your country, to have pride in yourself, to have pride in your sovereignty.
yeah, that's correct. You do have to have complete pride in your country in order to make that country move forward in the future.
And America.
America.
I am very proud of being an American, and I wouldn't want it any other way but to be American, because America is like, we talk about, oh, America ain't the only free country in the world, we're not the only this in the world, we're not the only that in the world. We are absolutely the only real free country in the world, and that's because we're not a democracy. It's because we are in fact a republic.
Constitutional republic.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Because you're right, that is where we are, and unless we want to get rid of that and rewrite into a new one, then we are adhered to the laws we have, and the laws we have say that we do not have open borders. What say you?
I would definitely close the borders, but how would you go rewriting the Constitution or making a new
Well, it
one?
explicitly says right in the Constitution that the Constitution is nothing will ever supersede the Constitution. No written doctrine, no treaty, no act, no
So
legislation
the
will
UN's
ever
null and
or can
void.
ever, since it has been enacted. It is the law of the land. Yet, it says explicitly right in the Constitution itself that should the people ever choose, they have the right to scrap it, the whole thing, and then write a new one. Doesn't say you can have the right to change and alter the current one until it's unrecognizable. You can continue to do that, but anybody that wants to fight you with force back, I'm talking fight the government back with force, like in a rebellion or whatever, has absolute justification for doing it. Whether they win or lose, history will write in the end that they had absolute justification for doing it, because America will eventually probably succumb to its quote-unquote diversity. Whether it's broke up into many other nations, or whether it took an economic fall and like total fall of Babylon type shit happened, it will pay for the things that, the rooster will come to roost.
Yeah, but
That being said, though, it doesn't mean that we're damned, we're doomed. Like I said, we kind of alluded to it in the beginning of this talk, that there are unsaid, like almost culturally driven, because they're coming from everywhere, like this concept of the Northwest Redoubt or the Ozark movement, or maybe some ethnic people have their own movement, Raza, and the Aztlan movement, where there's people migrating around all over, and it isn't just the people from Mexico migrating here. As that happens, the people here respond, the good people respond by leaving.
Yeah.
And those people are going somewhere. Where are they going? They're going to places like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, eastern Washington, eastern Oregon. They're going to places like Missouri and northern Mississippi, and like they're going to places that feel safer, that are further away from the gunk of
And
society's
familiar.
bullshit. Because let's face it, these are the things that people don't actually want to fucking talk about.
Well, it's
And
funny
we're
that you
taking the
mentioned
risk to
Exodus
talk about
because the same thing is actually going on in South Africa, and the evacuation of
Oh man,
the entire.
that is crazy shit. They're like literally killing off
Oh yeah,
all the white people are just getting murdered in this mass genocide. It's nuts. I never fucking see anything like it. Not in my age, but I imagine we'll see more of it.
Oh yeah, they're fleeing to Russia or
The ones that can.
Norway or yeah.
Some are very poor and they can't get out.
No.
I've seen some documentaries of some they're called Boers.
Right.
South African white people are called Boers. They were a mix of Dutch and German immigrants that went there 450 years ago and literally came upon a land that was completely uninhabited. There was nobody around when they got there. And since then, all these other people have moved in because it's been prosperous. You have like all these subdivides, even amongst what we think in America are just black people. There are actually what we call black people there, which the African there's the African indigenous, which are the ones that are in the tribes, like Zulu tribes that have moved in.
Right.
That weren't there before, but they've moved in and said, hey, you motherfuckers are on our land. And then there's black people,
right?
Which black people are a mix between Africans, indigenous Africans, and the Dutch, and they have their own groups. And then you have the Dutch mix of Dutch, German, white people that have a lot of the farms. And the whole argument is like land expropriation without compensation. So in other words, you don't pay for the stealing of the land. You don't give the land any value, so you take it from them and then you redistribute it amongst select black people or African natives.
Oh, they're actually begging for private security down there right now.
Well, borders are, yeah.
Yeah,
right,
I was looking into
they're
that.
being totally slaughtered off.
$200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a fucking year for being private security for some rich guys, and they are
right. And if you look it up, you can find tons of shit on this.
Interesting.
But the thing is this shit's all from like 5, 6, 8 months ago because they did this like huge thing right when January 2019 came around.
Yeah.
All the laws changed there where they allowed this all to start happening in mass. So they cut off the internet from the rest of the world and they will not let you see any information that's very current or very detailed if it is current.
So it's a blackout right now over there.
Yeah. In essence, yeah, absolutely, like Venezuela.
Oh.
You fucking look up Venezuela. The whole fucking world knows
I
Venezuela.
know. There's mass migration happening.
But if you
all
look
over
it
the
up,
place.
there's like nothing.
But we're in the era of climate change, and it's not the weather.
It's the climate of the man. Of
the people.
Of man. Yeah.
Right.
It's the zeitgeist.
It's the zeitgeist of the time. It's massively moving, and it's done it before. I mean, this is not the first time in history that this has happened, and to think that this is like the first time we've ever, like, people have been faced with this diversity, this conflict, would be silly. We may need to look back in history as to, what happens when certain areas, when certain cultures or religions really, because that's really what it is, when certain cultural religions collide. Because that's when you're going to see conflict, historically at least.
Yeah, that's true. And then lots of people have thought about it, wrote about it, heard about it, talked about it. So, like, what would you say about it? Like, for instance, like, I was, like, scouring the internet and shit, like most people do at nighttime after work. And I was came across this one Christian dude. And he was, like, totally hating on this shit. But he was talking about this dude named Albert Pike, right? He was like...
Albert Pike?
Yeah, he was fucking doing...
Okay.
Him?
Yeah, I'm
Like,
a
he was
little
an old
familiar with
dude
Albert
that
Pike.
was like a general in the Civil War? Yeah, the general in the Civil War, right? He has a statue in Washington. But he wrote this letter to this Italian dude named Manzini. And in the letter, he like described these like 3 world wars. And mind you, this was like after the First World War, but before the Second World War in like 19... Uhtred, do you remember?
I remember
1918 or some shit?
The First World War was 1914 to 1918, and the Second World War...
So this was like 1925 that Pike was doing this.
That's about 10 years before World War II.
Yeah. So this was about the time that Pike was writing this shit.
Maybe 12.
And he wrote this letter, anyways, that described these 3 world wars and how it was all going to go down. And he like was using terms like Nazism and Zionism
Before they were even defined, though.
before they were even a term. Yes, before they were even a term in public. This dude, this World War II general, or this Civil War general, was writing about these terms.
It almost like
Weird,
as a
right?
playbook, huh?
And then at the same time, he like was talking about he talked about the Second World War, talked about how it was going to be quote unquote fomented between the powers of the Zionist movement and the Nazis, and would come about by the this and the that, and it absolutely fucking happened exactly like it. Look this shit up.
Right, and then he goes on to a third world war, which then makes you go...
Third, yeah. It
well,
hasn't happened yet,
but,
yo.
Yeah, right, there hasn't been a third world
But
war.
this dude talks about it. Guess what the fuck he was saying?
What?
He was saying that it's gonna be fomented by a war fomented between the Christians and the Christians and the Hebrews and the Muslims, and it would equally annihilate them all. That he would unleash the nihilists and atheists upon the world, and it would result in the ultimate coming out of some fucking doctrine that they believe is like some shit. So you're gonna check it out, yo.
Yeah, I'll
Albert
definitely...
Pike's 3 World Wars. Just type that shit.
Right, I bet you can find it on YouTube
Yo,
easily. Definitely
I-
check it out, because I've seen a
That
few
name sounds
documentaries
so
on it.
familiar from other shit. Like I know I've heard that name otherwhere.
Yeah, but he's
Yeah,
like,
but-
I mean, these people are trying to control like the ages and shit, like the zeitgeist of man. They have that much power over the people. Are the people such like cows, like
Well,
herdsmen?
Well, him writing that was that prophecy, or was that written to be? Like, did he?
No, yo, this was like written in a private letter to some motherfucker named Manzini.
Well, that's
Right,
what
but I mean,
he's
like,
saying. Like, begging the question here is, did he foretell this, or did he manifest it?
Did he? It like almost scripted out.
It seemed to me like he scripted it, and then like it was,
Like it was purposefully created.
yeah.
See, that to me seems more nefarious. That to me is planning of mass destruction. I mean, you're talking